Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and I want to give a full sort of review and overview of Diablo 4 as I've played it for the past 5 days, completely like my opinions. Maybe you'll agree or disagree with them. Now that I've touched the end game, played a character to like level 60, played a character about level 50, just wanted to touch on the end game and then do a full review, basically a full overview of the game as I saw it and as I enjoyed or didn't enjoy some parts of it. So first of all, let me just rip right into it real quick. As a rating, you know, people love to hear a rating. I'd say Diablo 4 for me as it stands is something like a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10. And you know, I think it's kind of a personal thing. It should be somewhere from around a 6 to an 8, depending on what you're looking for out of the game, what you're kind of into in the game. I think if you're calling it a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10, you're being kind of blindsided by some shit or just being a bit disingenuous. If you're calling it lower than a 5, once again, very disingenuous. It's a pretty good game. It just depends on what boxes it ticks for you, what you're looking for to get out of this type of an ARPG or MMO style thing. And the ultimate question, is it worth your $70? It also depends on what $70 means to you. If you're happy to throw 70 bucks at a bunch of random games, you know, get some hours out of them and just see them for what they are, and it doesn't mean too much to you, then yeah, 70 bucks is probably a good price point for you. You'll enjoy the game most likely, and it's gonna be worth that money. If $70 you need to stretch a lot more and, you know, pick your games a bit more carefully and want to invest a lot of time into them and, you know, get every bang for your buck, and it does mean a lot to you, then I'd suggest you probably wait for the seasons to come out and see what they bring, because supposedly they're going to bring like more, you know, stuff to do in game overall, more expansion to the actual game as a whole, and I'd say wait to see what they're going to bring to that, because it could be a game changer, it could be not much. If it's not much, I'm not sure it's really worth the money for you to go into it just yet, because it might be a bit of a short-lived playthrough. So with all that, I want to start diving into talking about the end game, since the previous video talked about just the regular, you know, first couple acts and first impressions and stuff. I just want to talk about the end game, then I'll talk about probably the campaign, and then all the systems as Diablo has. So the game itself, currently my character, the rogue that I was playing, got up to like level 60, and that let me dip my toes into most of the game and most of the end game. And now I've got a level 50 Necro as well that leveled as a second character without the campaign. So once you've leveled a first character, done the campaign, got it to a certain level, whatever, your second character can just tick no campaign, and then you start out just doing whatever you want to do. But we'll talk about that in a sec. The end game of Diablo 4 is essentially the game you've been playing. So as you've started the game and you've been leveling up and doing like quests and mini quests and little dungeons and shit like that, that's basically what it is going to be in endgame as well, but it's a bit more expanded. So to begin with, once you've completed the campaign, you can now start doing Tree of Whispers stuff. Tree of Whispers stuff is getting 10 points of various quests. Some quests are worth more, some quests are worth less, and then you get a reward out of it, and it is essentially copy-paste the Diablo 3 bounty system. There's almost no difference whatsoever. You just do a few of these things. So you can see this one's worth like 5 of these Grim Favors. That's basically just a dungeon. So you do a dungeon, you get 5. You do some small event, you get 1, collect 10 of them, you go in, you turn in, you get a satchel of rewards, usually a legendary or 2, some shit like that. And they're all over the world, and they're a good opportunity to help fill out some of your renown, some of your little side quests at the same time as doing them. But if you really think about it, they are basically the D3 bounty system. Like, either kill a boss, kill a dungeon, you know, do a little side quest, do a little event, kill something, and then turn it in, and that is the bounty system in D3. To begin with, it feels okay. I think it's going to get a bit monotonous, and it's one of those things you're going to end up kind of skipping a lot of when you're, you know, deep into the game, but at the moment it's still okay, and especially once you're filling out some of these renowns and little side quests and whatever. And while your character needs gear, turning this in gives you a little bit of loot and doesn't feel too bad. The next thing beyond that is you can actually, just start to fill out all of your renown. So filling out renown, when you look at each certain zone, there's a bunch of stuff you've got to do to get a certain amount of just like, I don't know, renown points for that zone. And it kind of fills out to make your character better. So the end one is to also get some skill points and some paragon points. So it's going to make your character better. So to ignore all of this altogether, you're going to be missing something like 20 paragon points, which is a good bit of power for your character. So once you complete the campaign, or even during the campaign, you can be doing these side quests, doing all of the mini objectives that they want you to do for each zone, and it's basically just a completionist checklist. Just try and finish everything, try and do all the little side things. Once you're done, you move on to the next zone, and it's not too bad. Like the little side quests, some of them are pretty well made, you know, they've got some story to them as well, if you're into that sort of thing. Doing the strongholds, just exploring all of the zones, it's okay. I think the worst one is definitely the altars of Lilith. You have to like basically get all of them across the map. There's like 150 or some shit. They're usually pretty concealed, kind of in awkward locations, and if you're going to just run around naturally like doing the game, you're not going to find all of them or even half of them. You're going to find maybe like a third, maybe a quarter, because they are hidden, they are off to the side, and they're kind of just a dog shit system, I think, because they force you to just, like, you have to do these if you want to max out your character, because it's worth renown, it's worth a couple of extra stat points, like 70 to all stats or something if you do all of them. And all it does is basically everyone just has a map of all of them on their second monitor or tabbed out, and they just run to one zone, get it, run to the next zone, get it. It's just this absolute huge chore that you have to do if you want to max out your character and your playthrough. And it doesn't feel good. And I think the design of it is essentially to go, hey, we've created this huge world, you should explore it, and every angle of it, and see what we've made. And it kind of falls flat because a lot of the world is a bit repetitive. Like, you know, you've seen some parts, you've seen them all in some tile sets. And the altars themselves are just like hidden. Like, you gotta, like, I don't mind going around looking throughout the world, and I did do that during my playthrough, but they're hidden as fuck sometimes. Like, you'd miss them even while looking for them if you didn't know exactly what you were looking for. So yeah, there's that. That's one of the systems you can do, just like fill out a whole bunch of stuff on your map in this open world. And that's one of the end game points. So we got the Tree of Whispers, yep. We got Hell Tides. So I don't currently have one on my map, but once you're in World Tier 3, so there's, let's just go over that as well. There's 4 world tiers. To start with 1 and 2, you have the first one, which is essentially easy mode. Let's just call it easy mode. If you want to have a nice, comfortable playthrough, do World Tier 1. Veteran mode, which is, let's call it hard mode. You can start with that as well. It gives you a bit more XP, a bit more gold, but for the most part, it's basically there if you just want the playthrough to mean a bit more, have a bit more meaningful combat, challenges, bosses, and that's what I did right from the get-go, and it was fine. Like, it didn't feel too hard or too bad. I think most people can comfortably do veteran mode up to whatever level you need to. Around about level 40 to 50, you can unlock World Tier 3, and that's when you can start doing a lot of these endgame systems. And then the highest tier is Torment 4. That's once you're like 60 to 70, you can unlock this, and that just gives you the highest tier of items, but nothing really changes otherwise. So once you're in tier 3, that's when you can start doing like the last few endgame systems. Tier 4, you just get the biggest new items, which is just an extra tier of item, and otherwise things get harder. So once you're in tier 3, you can start doing these Hell Tides, which I don't have on my map at the moment because they spawn like every hour or two or some shit. An entire zone will become a Hell Tide, and it just has a red tinge look to it. There'll be like some raining fire sometimes, but the main draw of it is there's going to be more monster density, so you'll run around killing stuff. And the objective is to basically just do stuff in that zone. Kill stuff, do objectives, and it will drop its own special currency that there'll be random chests throughout the zone that you'll click on and, you know, find the right chest, click on the right chest, and it will have extra loot for you. It is currently one of the more rewarding things in the game. Feels pretty good. I think it could have more density because it's supposed to be this big, dense thing, and sometimes you feel like you're running around looking for the next thing to kill. But it's not a bad one. It's something that most people chase. The unfortunate thing is it's on a timer. Like, it'll show up, like I said, every hour or two. So it's giving you this FOMO style thing where you kind of have to jump on it because it's really good and you're like waiting for the next one. And if you're about to log off but this is on, then you feel like you should spend that extra 30 minutes of doing it. Something like that. Not a big fan of that in an ARPG, but we're kind of playing a half MMO at this point. So that's one of the other things you can do at Helltide. You got World Boss, which spawns like every 3 or 4 hours, I think, some shit like that. And we've seen it in the beta. There's only 3 World Bosses. It's actually kind of a shallow thing overall. It was supposed to be this like big MMO style draw, but ultimately it, ironically enough, is more of an end game at the start. Because the first world tier, the second world tier, once you're fighting this boss with your like-minded plebs, it's pretty tough. It's pretty epic battle. Once you get into tier 3 and 4, everyone starts getting geared up. It doesn't seem to scale that much, and the world boss just gets shit on. With a few, you know, well-geared characters in world tier 4 even, which is the highest tier. Once the guys are like level 70 plus, level 80, that sort of thing, you'll have a few people with you. It'll die in like 20 to 30 seconds, and it poses no challenge. It doesn't really kill you. It doesn't really do anything. It essentially becomes another fucking bounty to tick off. Let's just call it that. So it does become a bit lackluster. There's only 3 of them, and they're not super threatening once you're geared up, and they're not super worthwhile doing for the loot, but you still do them because they are a little bit of loot if they're that quick to kill. So world bosses, yep. You then have dungeons. Dungeons are the thing you have been running ever since doing the campaign. You'll occasionally run across your dungeon. You'll do it for a legendary aspect, which sometimes is pretty pivotal to your build. Sometimes it's just a bit whatever. Dungeons are okay. They're a bit spread out. There's a lot of them. A lot of them have similar tile sets. They won't feel too different to one another, but some of them will feel kind of different. And you've been running them since level whatever. You know, you can start running dungeons right away at level 1, a lot of these. And once you get to end game, they're exactly the fucking same, but higher level. But then you have the next tier of dungeon, which is the Nightmare dungeons. So you take your Nightmare Sigil, which is essentially a map as far as PoE terms are concerned. This is a tier 1. You'll start at tier 1s. It'll go all the way up to like tier 99, and they get harder. So this is the real dungeon system in this game once you get to these Nightmare Sigils, level 50 onwards, something like that. You'll run it. It's tier 1. It'll be pretty easy. It'll, you know, maybe you get a tier 2, tier 3. You can start crafting higher ones, and they just get harder and harder, higher level and higher level. They'll have affixes. They'll have some really annoying affixes sometimes, some really painful affixes, and sometimes a little bit of bonus to your character. So like killing a monster gives you attack speed, or there'll be like more loot, some shit like that. And they just scale up. The only real problem is they're the exact same dungeons you've been running this entire time, just with a bit more density and a bit more like affix to it. So if I turn one of these into a Nightmare dungeon that I ran at level 5, it'll be that map, that dungeon at level 95 with level 95 shit and with some harder stuff on it. That's the big problem with that. It's not like this distinct separation of endgame from early to late. And yep, it might be fun for some people. It might still be okay. My problem is that it doesn't really give you the sense of progression that you've gone from like your character going early, building up more power, and then all of a sudden you're in this end game because you're still doing the same stuff you were doing before, but it's harder. So that's the progression. Things just have higher numbers and hit harder and stuff, but it's not like a different piece of content. It's not a different layout, map, zone. You know what I mean? So yeah, not too sure about that. And I'm not sure I missed any end game other than that. Let me have a quick look. I just wrote a few things down. Yeah, I think that's basically what we're talking about. So try and get to level 100, do the higher tier Nightmare Dungeons, gear your character up. There is going to be an Uber version of Lilith, so just a level, highest level version of Lilith, level 100, just for the challenge of it, I think. Doesn't really mean anything else. And otherwise, the real end game is just gearing your character out and min-maxing your gear. And enjoying the process of playing. So with all that said, with all that end game, I feel like it's going to last, and most people and most characters are going to get like a week's worth of playthrough for this sort of thing, which ain't bad if you're having fun doing it. So you'll get to this end game as long as you are still like progressing your character in gear, because once you get to tier 3 there's new gear, once you get to tier 4 there's new gear. As long as all of this means stuff, that you're like constantly upgrading your gear, you're getting that next dopamine hit, it's pretty fun and it will keep you going. Once you've like got to a point where it's really hard to upgrade your gear, I feel like that's when it's gonna start getting tough to be motivated to do this stuff. So I felt that on my rogue at level 60. Like I could have started doing ancestral stuff, but it was getting a bit harder, and it was harder to like find the motivation to just go to that next tier of dungeon. And I wanted to just try a new character at that point, so we start all over again with the re-gearing process. And once you're doing all that re-gearing, like I said, that's what keeps it fun. That's what does a lot of these systems some justice and gives you some motivation to keep going. Once that runs out, I think it's going to take, the average player probably about a week per character to really hit this brick wall of motivation for the end game. And it's gonna, you'll be questioning why you're doing this. So if you don't think about it too much, then you'll have more fun. The more you think about it, the worse it's going to be, because this system, this Diablo style system for D2, D3, D4 has always basically been, you are farming and gearing your character up so that it can farm and gear faster. So your character gets stronger so that it can farm faster, so it can get stronger faster, so it can gear faster, so it can get stronger faster. That's basically all there is to it. The distinction to PoE, where some might say, oh, that's all PoE is, the distinction there is something huge to look forward to in PoE. There are large endgame bosses, there's large amounts of progression, there's large amounts of build variety that you can then, if you progress your one character all the way to a certain point where it's completed, you can farm a bunch so that you can make your next character even stronger or different, funner, because there's a lot of build enabling items, there's a lot of build differentiating items, and there's a lot of builds that can't be done that might be potentially way more fun for you without the right work put in. And likewise, just the bosses and stuff. There's not really anything huge to look forward to here, is what I'm saying, for the end game. Like, you can grind to level 100, you can make your character as strong as possible, and all it does is hit harder and farm faster, because there's no current really large end game to go for, like Maven boss style thing, Uber bosses, that sort of thing. And that's what might come more in seasons, might come more in the later parts of the game, and I have hopes for that. Like, they're not going to abandon this thing as far as it looks so far, and the core game is pretty fun, and yeah, there's good hope that there'll be more to like late game and stuff to do with this game as time goes on. But so far the core of it is pretty fun, just for a short while, I think, at least per character. Try out all the characters and you'll get some decent playtime out of it. So hopefully that's enough about the end game. You get a good picture for it. Like, I've had fun doing it, but I do definitely see like this sort of lack of motivation to do more at a certain point. Right now, this Necro is level 50, he's gearing up real nicely, and there's lots of progression to be made, and I'm having fun with it. I think a big key part of it is finding a build, which there aren't many of that are super good. Finding a build that you're finding fun, and then a large part of it is going around just enjoying the killing of things and smashing stuff around with that build. If you're going to be using a build that's not too like ingrained with you, then all of this stuff is going to have kind of a tough time feeling good. So maybe kind of a long video, but I'll move on to the story and the campaign. I want to cover everything in this video as opposed to making lots of little videos, and big spoiler warning from here on out, or for the next, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes while I rant about the story and the campaign, because it's going to be about the entire campaign if you've yet to see it. Spoiler warning. It's probably just, if you don't really care too much, it's probably just worth watching the cinematics or some shit on YouTube. And that'll be enough of the campaign for you, to be honest. It's got some really cool cinematics, and I mean like really cool cinematics. It's got some cool story plot lines, but for the most part, you don't have to play this game for the campaign. It's not too mind-blowing. It's decent. I originally thought it was going to be really good, and some of it still was, maybe about half, let's say, at this stage. So in my previous video, I think I did Act 1 and 2. Act 1 and 2 I thought were still really good, for the most part. So you start out here, you do this zone, you go over there, you do that zone. Act 2, all the way up through there, kind of makes sense, it kind of flows, it feels pretty good, some cool moments. By the time you get into like Act 3, 4, it just starts to take a turn and get a bit more confusing, and a lot of the plot points and storylines stop making as much sense. And then let's just wrap it up and say Act 6, pretty damn cool. So there was a lot of cool stuff there. It really pays off in the end with lots of action, lots of combat and the zone and the bosses, and the story still gets a bit weird. So I'll delve more into all of that right now. The first thing I wanted to say is it is a bit open. So because it's this big open world, because like you have this big open world, the way they've kind of done it is I don't know, the story just feels a bit meshed. So you have like Act 1, and then you're just in Act 2, then Act 3, Act 4. There's no distinct like point from Act 1 to Act 2. Like in the previous Diablos, you know, kill a boss, there's a cutscene, then it says Act 2. All of a sudden you're in that. There wasn't any of this here. You're just like doing a quest. Sometimes a boss doesn't even feel that largely like a boss, and then all of a sudden you're doing a next quest chain, and in your quest log it'll say Act 2. And if you didn't look at the quest log, you didn't know you were in Act 3 or 4 or some shit like that. You just wouldn't know. So it like takes you to another zone maybe that feels a bit similar to a previous zone, and you didn't really know you made that progression. So that was one point that I wasn't a big fan of. But other than that, like I said, Act 2 felt pretty good up to the point where we got to like a few characters I didn't particularly like, but that's whatever. There's a lot of problems with the story for me, and Lilith being one of them. Like, I still didn't really get her motivations, what she was after, what she did, what she wanted to do, what we accomplished, like killing her, any of that shit. It felt a bit confusing and convoluted, but we can touch on one of the main things. We save some chick because she's about to be turned into Andariel, or Andariel summoned through her, because we really wanted to stop that. She's one of the lesser evils or something. Lilith wanted to summon her, to use her or some shit, and we saved some chick, and you know, she would have otherwise been a lesser evil for all of eternity as far as she's concerned. And she's like, oh cool, thank you for saving me and stuff. And we're like, yep, we saved you. And then while that's going on, they summon Andariel anyway. Don't know. That apparently was a thing. We saved the chick from being turned into Andariel. Andariel gets summoned randomly anyway. I 1v1 Andariel, which mind you is an Act 1 end boss of Diablo 2, so no huge surprise there. Like, this is supposed to be this big evil thing that we're afraid of, and it's midway through this game, and yeah, we crush it. It shows up, we crush it easily, and then we come back in, and no one even fucking notices. They're just like, oh, we were busy with the girl, and you just walk in and go, yeah, I saw it in Andariel, by the way, and they're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. So it was supposed to be this big plot point that she's coming and we need to stop that, and then like we do stop that, then it happens anyway, then we kill her, and they're like, yeah, whatever. And then the chick that we save, like you would think kind of grateful or some shit, it's like they turn a page straight away after that, because later in the story we come back to that chick we save, and she's just like, I don't, why should I help you? I don't even know you. Like, it seemed like two different people wrote this thing. There was this huge disjointed mess in that story there. So that felt really weird. And then, yeah, just in general, like Act 3, 4, 5, all was just going all over the place. There was a lot of dialogue. It felt, I kind of wanted it to be over by that point. And then, like I said, once we got to Act 6, there was a big payoff, because Act 6 is when we get to go down to hell, kill a lot of stuff, see a few big cutscenes. So it felt pretty good by that point. Mind you, at some point, we also find Duriel. So one of the other lesser evils just shows up randomly out of nowhere. And we kill him, and, you know, nothing matters there. Nothing was mentioned, which is a bit weird. So by the end of the story, we, like, Inarius, who just seemed really inconsequential to the entire thing, dies. Donan, one of the, I think that's his name, that guy dies in the most pathetic Cain Butterflies style way possible. Just... He just then finished killing the world boss with us. He's one of the epic Haradrim or some shit. He fought a Shava, you know, one of the 4 that was there with us, fought it, and then he stands next to a wall and just gets fucking shanked by, I don't know, like some half soul ghoul thing. And then he goes, dead. And we're like, oh shit, that sucks. That was weird. And then I absolutely hated the end. Hated it. Like, we didn't have a choice in what we were doing with Mephisto. It felt like we were leading up to this choice where we could choose to be like Lilith, Mephisto, some shit like that. They made the choice for us, or rather some 15-year-old girl did. And then we kill Lilith, it's over, and then the girl gets the Soul Stone and says, I'm just leaving. But she doesn't even say it to us. She writes it down in Haradric text that the other guy reads for us, interprets for us, says she took Soulstone and just left, and you don't follow her. And we're like, oh, but I think we should follow her. And he's like, no, respect her wishes. And we're like, okay. Like, maybe they were going for a Wanderer initial D2 theme where she might become kind of another Wanderer. She's maybe corrupted by insanity from the Soul Stone, and that's where she's doing. And it's leading up this big open-ended thing for more expansions and Primevals later. Sure, I get that, but it could have been done way better. So they do that, but then if she's getting like corrupted and she's Wanderer and she's, you know, Soulstone insanity, and then we say we should go after her, maybe that's logical, but the guy's like, no, we should respect the 15-year-old girl's wishes. I don't know, man, that doesn't make any fucking sense to me at all. So I hated that ending. But otherwise, story was fine. I still didn't really get the whole Lilith thing too much. Like, I didn't know what she wanted, why she was there, why she was like walking from place to place. And it has to be said, Diablo 4, Diablo didn't really have a Diablo. I mean, sure, it's probably coming in the future. Diablo 1, end boss, big old Diablo. Diablo 2, end boss of the original one, before the expansion, big old Diablo action. You, like, you know, fight him after the cutscene that was huge and epic. My childhood self absolutely loved that cutscene. Diablo's up and Diablo's into a portal, and then you know there's going to be a Diablo there, and you go and you fight him. Yep, that was great. Diablo 3, lots of cutscenes, big old Diablo stuff. Diablo 4 can't even be called Diablo at this point. I think they made mention to him once so far. They're just like, oh yeah, by the way, everyone has fear because Lord of Terror, Diablo, some shit like that. So this game may as well be called like Diablo 4, The Walking of the Lilith or some shit. I don't know. Obviously there's going to be stuff in the future, but for now, where's my Diablos? You can't keep having Diablo, obviously. You know, you can't have Diablo 10 where we've killed Diablo 10 times, but there's got to be something, right? Something? Anything? Maybe? Maybe I'm just nitpicking. Either way, yeah. I think that's about enough of the campaign, right? We can talk a bit more about other stuff now. I'll go over some other stuff real quick. Combat. The combat people have praised, and rightfully so. It does most of the time feel pretty good. Some stuff feels bad. So as we've touched on plenty, generators into spenders does feel kind of bad because there's somewhat of an imbalance with them. Like, your generator, as in the thing that gives you your resource, and then your spender, the thing that uses the resource. Typically, yep, you know, have a few attacks and then spend with a big hit, and the big hit is what's going to be your main skill. There's a bit of an imbalance here because for the most part, like all of your generators just suck. They do, like, especially once you get to end game, they do like 0 fucking damage to the bosses, to the enemies, to anything. So if you are still stuck needing to use a generator, then you are just stuck like hitting like a wet noodle and then doing a big attack. So, you know, they either need to be way faster or generate more for the most part, because the game is still just going to be all about trying to not have to generate shit and fix your resource cost. And once people do fix their resource costs and stuff, that's when they're running around blasting and it feels a lot better. So that's a pretty common complaint a lot of people have made, and I would agree with. Other than that, the combat, yeah, it feels good for the most part plenty of times. I think as a melee, it was somewhat unfriendly a lot of the time. Like a lot of mobs out there just designed, and encounters designed with melee unfriendliness in mind. I got through it well enough as a rogue, but it was definitely frustrating at times. And it's a level of frustration I haven't felt while playing this Bone Necro as a pure range. Like, I haven't noticed almost any of that shit that my rogue could pinpoint throughout all these kinds of different mobs and bosses and encounters, just going, why am I supposed to feel this bad about this situation? Almost every single ranged mob you fight in this game does this. Like, every time it attacks and then slowly moves away from you. Which, fair enough, it makes sense, right? That's what something that is trying to live and kill you would do, but who the fuck cares? I'm playing a video game. I want it to take some damage and die, and then I move on to the next thing. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, a bit of melee unfriendliness, but yeah, the generators. Otherwise, yeah, look, combat feels pretty crisp. The game's obviously beautiful, and a lot of the skills are very beautiful, and they sound good, they feel good to use. The generator system feels kind of bad, and then obviously there just aren't that many skills, as we've gone over in past videos and stuff, and that problem is exacerbated by the fact that a lot of them aren't very viable either, without the right legendary powers. So Necro, I think, has lesser a problem with this, because a lot of these builds are viable and you can kind of spec into plenty of them and just enjoy kind of a different playstyle depending on what you choose. Rogue definitely had that problem. So there's like 3 bow skills, like 2 melee skills. One of the melee skills much better than the other one. The other one's okay. One of the bow skills much better than the others. The other 2 are kind of shit. But then ultimately that one melee skill that's really good is way better than everything else you're going to do. And the rogue doesn't feel like it has much choice. It's just you gearing up and being funneled towards the build that is good, because the other builds feel kind of shit. And then the combat, yeah, it feels good once you've got all the stuff for the build that makes it feel good. Up until that point, you are just playing like half a build, maybe even a quarter of a build, maybe even less in some cases. So a lot of the skills and powers and all that do feel like they were created and then gutted and then put onto items so that you put that stuff together and then have the real build, which leaves you feeling a bit shit early game, and it's something you may have to get over. Like, I know plenty of people have tried playing a bit early and then just stopped because it didn't feel super good. There's like this little hump you have to get over where your character's then going to start feeling good. Once it gets to that point, though, it feels pretty damn good. The skills, yeah, so I've kind of gone over that, right? Like, the skills themselves, some feel really good, some are pretty viable, some aren't very viable. The ultimates, most of the time, don't feel super good. Like, my current ultimate here feels like it does fuck all, but it's like a buff stick, and I may even get rid of it. So I don't know, the choices are still a bit weird. There still needs to be more expansion on all of this, ultimately, to feel really good in the end, but it's a good base. And then the Paragon system, so it's something I was looking forward to seeing and what it was going to do for the game, and hopefully it was going to revolutionize some builds in the way you play. It doesn't really do that, but I am still a bit pleasantly surprised with how much bigger it is than I would have thought. It is a system where you just basically get more power for your character. instead of just the boring +5 stat way, you still get stats, but you work towards certain things and customizations, and it's just getting your character more power in the form of like more damage, more defense, stuff like that, as opposed to customizing a build in, you know, different forked ways. So you spec into certain things, you'll have glyph sockets that do different stuff and they customize various things, and then you get to a point where you attach another Paragon board and you can rotate them and stuff, and yeah, people are going to have very different end game looking boards. So overall it's better than I thought it would be, but I still think it's not changing your skill or build in enough of a way that I would have ideally hoped. It's a good system though for this type of game, I think, so nothing too wrong with that. And one thing I actually forgot to mention and rant about was the damage numbers. Like, yep, they can be annoying and you can turn them off though, so fair enough. But who the fuck thought all the status text is okay the way it is right now? If you look at basically any Barb stream especially, and they come into a huge pack of mobs, and the vulnerability spam or the immune spam, all kinds of shit just becomes absolutely unbearable. Like, you cannot, the visual clarity is garbage at the later game of status text, because you just can't see anything through that text, and you can't turn it off. You can turn off the combat text, you can't turn that off. And yep, look, fair enough, PoE has terrible visual clarity as well, and that's one of its big problems, but at least it's coming from the skill effects themselves and the MTX that you're buying, not just the default vulnerability and immune spam and all of that. So that's just something that had to be said, and I was going to, but I forgot, so I quickly chopped it into the video here. And then back to classes. You still only have 5 classes. I feel like with the way that this skills system is set up, the limited number of skills, they could have easily gone up to like 7 classes and included almost everything. I think, you know, we'll probably have like a Paladin or some shit, or an Amazon in the expansion coming up, but I think to launch, given how bare bones some of this stuff feels, 7 classes would have been more appropriate, especially with the way that a lot of, you know, you see a lot of the same people all over the place. There's like a lot of sorceresses, there's a lot of rogues out there. Would have been more varied if there were more classes, but the 5 base classes are alright and pretty cool, and they all have fairly cool aesthetics to them. I'm not a big fan of the droid personally, but or the Barb particularly, but the others not too bad, and yeah, they're really cool base aesthetics. So the Necro, I think, looks completely sick and has some really cool armors and stuff. This is just your cosmetic setup that you can do completely built into the game, and lots of really cool looks there, lots of really cool customizations. So that's a big strong suit. So the art department for this game knocked it out of the park. Like, the whole game's pretty much stunning and has a really good aesthetic and vibe to it. And we can touch on the cash shop thing as well. If you're worried about the cash shop currently, like, yeah, look, I'd rather it didn't exist in a game that you paid for in full. It'd be nicer to have it in full, just give you everything. But currently, it's not very offensive. Like, you've paid money for the full thing, and you will look as cool as you want to, and it'll be, you won't really be missing out on anything by not spending money. People that spend money are just gonna like get a character to a certain different look like immediately that is just there, and you just go, yeah, I want it, and boom, you've instantly got it. Whereas you will still have very, very good looking characters, and you shouldn't really be feeling like you miss out on anything at the moment. I think they've somewhat intentionally at the moment on release given you nothing too flashy or crazy, and it will, you know, so that you accept the digestion of a cash shop in the game a lot more immediately, and then in the future there's going to be much crazier shit. But the fact is, you're paying for the full game at the moment, $70, and you get more than enough of the cool looks to feel good about your character and your playthrough. If it was launched like PoE, for example, where most of your characters look ass and then they get better through only money after already paying 70 bucks, then that would have been an outrage, but that's not the case. So it's not too big of a deal, I don't think, at the moment. Obviously, like I said, I'd rather this thing didn't exist, but I don't think it's anything to get too outraged about, that this thing's like 25 bucks or something. You don't need it, and it doesn't really matter. You'll look very good regardless. And then lastly, I suppose the item system. It's not too deep. Like, the actual customization of your real items it's not too bad. Like, it's a bit of a fishing, it's a bit of a lottery to get all the right stuff, and there's going to be some good min-max to fully build your character into the right thing. Like, I just then found this pair of gloves that pretty much has 4 affixes I want, and that's going to be rare, like, to have all of the right stuff that you want on a piece of gear. A lot of your gear, for example, this, just shit. So then there's a lot of min-max. You do have unique items that show up that enhance your build to some large extent. It's deep enough for what it needs to be, and I'm not too upset with the gearing system. The only real problem is that you essentially just have to like re-gear every time you get to a tier. So you get to you know, you're playing the game through World Tier 1 and 2, and you're finding uniques, or you're not finding uniques, you're finding legendaries and rares, and it's great. You can kit your character out to a real good point where you think you've done about as much as you can, and then as soon as you go to Tier 3, all of your previous shit is invalidated, because then sacred uniques and sacreds and legendaries start dropping that are your previous gear but slightly better, and your previous gear is just going to be like much worse after a little while. And then you farm through this, and it gets to a point where you are about as good as you can be. You start World Tier 4, and then Ancestral shit drops, which is once again the same shit but slightly better, and it invalidates all of your previous shit, but you get new cooler uniques. So it at one point feels good that you've got this new whole dopamine hit. You started the next tier, and all this shiny loot is dropping all over the place that you really want to start upgrading into. But it also feels kind of bad that your previous work is just immediately thrown out the window, and it's not a huge like difference. It's basically the stuff you're wearing but slightly better. So yeah, like these are just legendary gloves, but then you have sacred legendary, which is just an extra affix slot, and slightly higher numbers. And then Ancestral is going to be the same thing, slightly higher numbers. The uniques have more potential. They got slightly cooler stuff happening for them. They are still basically legendaries, but they just have more interesting or more build enabling sometimes special mods attached to them, and then potentially a few other quirkier mods that items wouldn't otherwise have. So the gearing system it's good enough for what it needs to be, but it obviously leaves a lot to be desired. Still kind of a Diablo 3 based system. And the crafting is basically non-existent. There's like no crafting. You just grab your piece of gear that hasn't been upgraded, so non-upgrade at all, and then you just upgrade it, make it slightly better for some money, and wouldn't you know it, there you go, you've crafted your piece of gear to perfection. The only other thing you can do is change one mod on the item. So go to your other dude, and that is this one here. And you can enchant and change one of these mods for a hefty sum of money, and every single time you try and change it, it ramps in cost extremely, to the point where you can probably only really justify doing it like 5 or 10 times, and then you have to just settle with what you've got. And yeah, it's a bit maybe too much in that way at the moment, but it is what it is. That's what we got. And then I suppose I could also mention the mount. Mount's kind of cool, but it's still very weirdly coded and stuff at the moment. Like it will just stop on pebbles. Its turning is a bit weird. It's got a cooldown associated with like going on and off of it in combat, out of combat. Yeah, I don't know about the whole mount. And then I guess I can lastly say the open world thing. Maybe a bit too open world for me. Everything feels a bit meshed and blended, but overall, yeah, it's kind of just like an MMO style D3 that is fun for what it is. And yeah, if you're looking for a if you're going to be playing Diablo and looking for PoE, you ain't going to find it, so don't bother doing that. It's a separate thing altogether. Is it going to kill PoE? No, they're different things, so I wouldn't worry about that either. It will compete for some people's time, for sure, but a lot of people probably choose to play this more than they choose to play PoE if they've done the other thing before, but it's a different game and a different genre, I think. I mean, yes, still ARPG, but I'd say this is a lot closer to just an arcadey casual smash fest that has a bit of MMO style elements that should just feel good to log in and play for a few hours every day or two, and that'll last you a few weeks. Nothing too deep to think about, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm having fun so far. I think I'll still have fun for, if I make it for myself, maybe another couple of weeks, try some other characters, but I could easily finish gearing this character out and stop playing as well. It's not super compelling at the moment to need to keep going. I'll have to wait and see what seasons do, but as far as I'm concerned, it's good enough for a few weeks, and it'll be a fun few weeks, and hopefully seasons change that into a much more longevity-based game. But good start so far. Like I said, for me, it's about a 7.5 out of 10. Love the cinematics, love the world, love the art, love a lot of the skills, love plenty of the mobs, combat. Hate a few other things, but, you know, it's not a big deal. It's still not a bad game. Hopefully that wasn't too long of a review, and a lot of it made sense. Feel free to let me know if I was wrong about some things. I will maybe respond and change my point of view. I'm still playing this character a bit, so, you know, the next couple of days are going to be kind of pivotal, because it'll show me whether or not I'm like getting to that wall that I was talking about, or if I'm still ramping, enjoying it, and you know, changing my opinion just a little bit on the end game. But that'll be it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you guys are having fun Diablo 4 if you're playing it, and see you guys next time.